an appalling 1 to 2 star rating, with an additional 2 receiving a 3-star rating. As Lancaster continues to make a concerted effort to attract retirees and seniors like myself, we must provide the best care possible regardless of the economic status of this segment of our most vulnerable citizens, many of whom have worked hard to make the Lancaster we have today. My experience as a chaplain has given me a bird's eye view of what goes on in these facilities. Nursing home facilities differ depending on who they cater to in these, whether they have private insurance or if they only receive Medicare. The resident to staff ratios are drastically different, and there's little time allotted for interactions between staff and residents, which significantly harm their stimulation. The Lancaster Health Care Rights Committee was recently informed by a Pennsylvania state representative that the former St. Joseph's Hospital is slated to be used as a skilled nursing care facility by Presbyterian Senior Living, in conjunction with the Longcrest community being built to provide a complete continuum of care for their Medicaid recipients. Although we're glad that it sounds like the property will be used for the health care for the poor, we're disappointed that the promise that this administration has made to the public during the May 20th neighborhood meeting regarding the UPMC site was not kept. We demand that you keep a fraction of that promise that you made to the community by backing the plan for this living facility, which would care for the elderly who are Medicare recipients and not turning it in the old St. Joseph's Hospital into luxury housing.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Harris, do we have anyone else who called ahead this evening?
Yes, Mr. President. Next is Matthew Rosing.
Mr. Rosing, good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Matthew Rosing. I'm the co-coordinator of the Lancaster Healthcare Rights Committee with Put People First PA and a leader in the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival. I'm here tonight to address to you all the lack of mental health services in our community and implore the city government and the community to support us in our efforts as we advocate for the needed changes. As someone who suffers from mental illness, I have seen firsthand the consequences of the lack of proper treatment. Too many times, those of us who struggle with mental health issues are rushed through the system, leading to inadequate care and misdiagnosis. Many have also been criminalized for their actions that could have been prevented had they received the proper care from the beginning. We have recently discovered that the Lancaster County Commissioners are looking to cut funding to the behavioral health and drug and alcohol treatment centers. This is not just irresponsible, it is also downright dangerous. Many of our communities suffer from mental health illnesses, which for the most stems from trauma, and not getting the proper care has led to a spike in homelessness, suicides, addiction, and adds to the rate of mass incarceration. We must do better for people. The Lancaster Healthcare Rights Committee is asking you to take a stand with us against the county's plans to dismantle desperately needed programs that are in place to ease the suffering of our fellow community members. We ask that you look inside yourselves. Look to those that you love and imagine them being in a crisis and having nowhere to turn. Many of those who are homeless suffer from mental illness and will be the most impacted by this proposed budget cut. Many incapable of holding down a job or even having the understanding of basic self-care in general. How can we stand by and allow unnecessary suffering to occur? I ask you to look to the greater good in this. Do not be intimidated by the naysayers. Do not allow the pressures from above to stop you from taking a stand against this injustice. This will be a battle, but is a fight to regain our humanity. To do the right thing, proclaim enough is enough. These attacks on the poor must end. We are made in God's image. We are all valuable, all deserving of love and compassion. This is your chance to show the people in the community that you will stand up for them. Don't squander this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Harris, do we have anyone else who called this evening?
Yes, Mr. President. Next is Tammy Rojas.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Rojas.
Thank you. My name is Tammy Rojas. I'm a member of the Lancaster Healthcare Rights Committee of Put People First PA, and I'm on the coordinating committee of the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival. When I read about the recent reports in the paper about the underperforming schools and heard discussions about it and its relation to poverty. It hit home for me, and I instantly thought of the many articles that came out this past year talking about a rise in adolescent suicides. The first time I remember contemplating suicide, I was in 3rd grade. The first time I came very close to following it out, I was in 7th grade. The only thing that has prevented me from following through it over the years was the fear of not doing it correctly. Thanks to Put People First PA and the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival, I find myself finally wanting to live despite the struggle because I have finally found community and encouragement. Mental health issues in adolescence can stem from many different things. For today, let's focus on trauma related to poverty. When all you feel is pain and life is nothing but a daily struggle to survive, you tend to stop caring about performing well in school, let alone even attend. It's a struggle to do homework when you're homeless and hungry. It's a struggle to get up early and be out the door by 7 a.m. when you just went to bed at 3 a.m. because you spent the night working and studying. It's a struggle to graduate high school when all you know of life is fighting for daily survival. I applaud those who make it through this to reach graduation. I, on the other hand, did not. We must not blame the children, parents, or teachers for the poverty in our school districts. Poverty is a systemic issue. That's why we must actively work towards fundamental systemic change in our society. We must nurture our children, encourage them, come together as a community, see to it that the children, parents, and teachers in our community have their basic needs met so that learning, teaching, and living can be their focus as well as ours. That's why tonight we are here to demand the following. Make poverty and the interlocking injustices a prime focus going into 2020. Call a public meeting to discuss poverty in our community. Join us and support us as we begin to push the Lancaster County Commissioners and the state government to do the same. Poverty is not only a city or urban issue. Poverty stretches all across our county. The city and county government and the community must actively work together on this. We must cross the rural-urban divide, and we must come together if we truly wish to be successful in our fight against poverty in our community. Our lives are on the line here. This is not an option.
Thank you, Ms. Rojas. Did anyone else call ahead, Mr. Harris?
No, they have not, Mr. President.
Thank you. Move on to reports requested by council.
We have none tonight, Mr. President.
Thank you. We'll move right into reports of committees and council meetings held on November 4th, 2019. We'll start with the Public Safety Committee. Councilor Soto.
Thank you, Council President. Public Safety Committee did not meet on the 4th. I have nothing to report, Council President.
Thank you. We'll move into Public Works Committee. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Public Works Committee addressed two resolutions, Resolution number 61, 2019, and Resolution number 62, 2019, and they are on the agenda tonight, and we will discuss them in further detail when they come up on the agenda.
Great. Thank you. Economic Development Committee, Councilor Craig.
Thank you, Mr. President. Economic Development did not meet. I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Finance Committee, in place of Councilor Ballantyne this evening, is Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Committee also addressed three resolutions, two resolutions and one bill. Resolution number 64, 2019, authorizing appointment of Mayor Duschel to conduct the city's independent financial audit. And Administration Resolution number 65, 2019, to amend 2018 Capital Improvement Plan. Administration Bill Number 16, 2019, appropriating $600,000 in unfunded funds for Beaver Street Storage Facility, and we will discuss those as they come up on the agenda.
Thank you. Move on to Community Planning Committee. Counselor Smith-Waddell.
Thank you, President Reichenbach. Did we have a meeting? Did community planning meet last week? I can't recall. No, we discussed the Historical Commission's recommendation regarding 151 North Queen. That is the garage to be constructed in Ewell Plaza, and primarily on the subject of the facade, though the recommendation is for the whole development project, and it is right there on the agenda, so we'll get to that. Thank you, President Reichenbach.
Thank you. Personnel Committee, Counselor Diaz.
Yes, Mr. President. The Personnel Committee met on November 4th and considered the following reappointments. Ted Darkus, Fort Lancaster County Convention Authority, and he will start September 15, 2019 through September 15, 2023. Carl Parks, Kristen Krimmel, Ashley Spots, her reappointment to the Shade Tree Commission, her term is, or their terms, shall I say, December 31st, 2019 to December 31st, 2024. Harold Bauer Jr. and Jean Kirk Wigglers, her reappointment to Lancaster Municipal Authority. Her term is December 31st, 2016, and will go through December 31st, 2018. The retrospect, I guess it would be December 31st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023. Jean Kirk would also be reappointed to Lancaster Higher Education Authority, January 1st, 2020 to 2025. Robert Harry Diggs III, and that would be the Human Relations Commission for the term of September 30th, 2019 to September 30th, 2022. Ben Bamford, Lancaster Industrial Development Authority, for the term of December 31st, 2019 to December 31st, 2024. And that would be also reappointed Michelle Kane, Lancaster City Housing Authority. The term will be November 21st, 2019 to the November 21st, 2024. And I make a motion for all these reappointments to be approved.
Second.
Motion and a second for the reappointments. Council comments from the public? Before you vote, I just want to thank the mayor again and the different departments and council members who've really been working hard to try to recruit and retain good people to really give us some insight and expertise on so many of these different boards. So thank you for that. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Rivera?
Aye.
Mr. Smith-Waddell?
Aye.
Mr. Soto?
Aye.
And President Reichenbach.
Hi. We will move into the legislative agenda. The Heritage Conservation and Historic Districts. Consider the following applications and recommendations from the Historic Commission and Historical Architectural Review Board for improvements to properties within the Heritage Conservation and Historic Districts. If council will indulge me, I am going to take items B and C together first in case there is anybody here who would like to hear those before we go into the conversation about the other. They have both been recommended for approval. I would ask for a motion for items B and C.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for items B and C. Council comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Ballantyne. Sorry.
We've been waiting a long time.
Yes. Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Rivera?
Aye.
Mr. Smith-Waddell?
Aye.
Mr. Soto?
Aye.
And President Reichenbach.
Aye. Move on to item A. Lancaster Parking Authority, owner of 151 North Queen Street, proposes construction of a new 6-story parking garage to include a 2-story library and commercial space. This application was recommended for denial by the Historical Commission. Councilor Smith-Waddell?
Thank you. So typically the way this goes is that we have a motion and a second, and then we open it for discussion. I'm gonna, with council president's permission, I'm going to turn that on its head a little bit. In a moment, I'm going to introduce a motion, and first I want to say, however we go on this tonight, I feel responsible for this decision because on council, this is my part of the store. I sit on the Public Art Advisory Board, which I'm proud to do, and all historical commission recommendations, be they for approval or denial, also come through the committee of council that I chair. A thing that has been very apparent, I think, to all of us up here from the beginning, and that all of you have made very apparent, is that a stitch was dropped in this process, and that we could have done better. And I think that that goes all around, and it also goes to me as a potential connecting point between the Public Art Advisory Board and the Historical Commission. But we are where we are now, I think, because of the dedicated work of the administration, the Public Art Advisory Board, and the members of the Historical Commission, none of whom has approached this process with anything but due diligence and the best intent. I work with some of the best people I've ever met, and I genuinely believe that. And I think that this has been an opportunity for all of us, frankly, to look in the face exactly what we've been doing wrong in terms of communication, both internally and externally, and public process. If you recall, last week, a question was raised as to whether council was limited to the options of, sorry, I think I'm coming down with something, approval or denial, or whether we could approve with certain conditions as to guarantee a certain level of public outreach process. And I believe, sorry, I asked that question specifically, and to their credit, again, regardless of the way this goes, the administration did respond, and thus the following motion, which I feel, again, because this is my part of the store, I should be the one to introduce, regardless of how this goes this evening. So, Council President Reichenbach, councilors, I move that council issue a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed 151 North Queen development, conditional on a community engagement plan, which will be read into the record with all legal force and effect tonight, this evening, as follows, and which the city administration will later, as we discuss this item, elaborate on further. But it includes the following as indispensable components. Phase 1, Part 1. R&R will visit Lancaster to meet with the 151 North Queen project team responsible for the engineering and construction of the development. Phase 1, Part 2. R&R will remain in close contact with Hamel Architects to coordinate architectural requirements for the artwork. Phase 1, Part 3. R&R will receive and consider findings and recommendations from the Historical Commission as documented in the Commission's meeting minutes and reports, content to be collected and provided by the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development, respond to said feedback, and engage with selected members of the Historical Commission regarding said feedback. Phase 2. R&R will make at least 3 additional visits to Lancaster between April 2020 and September 2020, timed with key opportunities for community participation. That's Phase 2, Section 4, sorry. Phase 2, Section 5, R&R, these are the artists, I apologize, will meet with key stakeholder groups to include members of the Ewell family, the Public Library Board, and selected members of the Historical Commission to understand the scope and parameters of Lancaster's historic architecture ordinance. Phase 2, Section 6, R&R will have a presence at community festivals and events to gain insight and input towards the creative development of the artwork. Phase 2, Section 7. R&R will utilize a range of engagement techniques, including those noted above, to determine what language, if any, will go on the building facade. And Phase 2, Section 8, as a culmination of the engagement process, R&R will hold design charrettes and/or other forums where community members can vote for their favorite artistic concept of 2 to 3 presented, depicting relevant variables related to the words, color, arrangement, and composition of the materials to be included in the final realized design. That is the motion.
Thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time to lay that out for us. It is appreciated. So do we have council comments on the motion before we go to the public?
Do we have a second?
Oh, yes.
Second.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve a certificate of appropriateness. Council comments?
I'm going to jump back in.
Sure.
Just to say, because I was reading the motion, just to say that a significant amount of the feedback that we received on the project was negative. A significant amount of the feedback that we received on the project was positive, and I will say that that's unusual. Usually, people speak up only and exclusively when they are angry about something, and it's less frequent that they speak up in support. A number of people approached us without prompting by us to say or to ask, can you implement certain conditions? Is that within council's power? And my sense of the feelings of council, though I can speak for no one but myself as an individual, is that the only conditions under which we feel comfortable moving this forward, weighing community input on both sides, the Historical Commission, the Public Art Advisory Board, and all other stakeholders, is with conditions that guarantee a community outreach process, which I know that many of you, and indeed some people up here, believe should have happened before now, but is a good faith effort to produce the best outcome from where we are standing. And with that, I'll stop talking for a while.
Not for too long, I hope. Thank you, Councilor. Council comments?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Grapera, and then Councilor Craig.
Councilor Smith-Waddell, I thank you for working with the administration to come up with this amendment. And I have no problem with this amendment at all. But as you were saying, once council takes this vote to approve this project, we are out of it, correct?
Yes, this is barring some spontaneous goodwill gesture from, I suppose, the parking authority, the artist, or the administration. This is the last legislative stopgap.
Well, my question is, and I'm not sure if there's an answer to this question, is what assurances can we have to that the wishes of this community engagement can be upheld in the future?
You know, John,
And again, I don't think there is an answer to this.
John, I've talked a lot up here about how I've done work in the arts, and a thing that I've done in especially working in theater is to get parameters from a director and say, and take in those parameters and say, all right, I hear that you said that. That's nice. I'm going to do this thing and let you decide what you're going to do with it. Ultimately, I will say I think R&R did a step better than that, because I don't think they had all the parameters from the beginning. Right. But I'll echo your sentiment to say that it would go a long way for council's confidence, and I think for the assembled public. You don't have to nod or cheer or anything, but to hear that the administration also feels that this community outreach process is important, which I think they'll say in a moment, and that they are willing to put what influence they have into ensuring that this plan is carried out and the community feedback is responded to. But I can only speak for myself. But that's well taken, Councilor Capera.
I want to give Councilor Craig an opportunity to speak, but I also want to give the mayor an opportunity as well to kind of comment on that if she'd like to. But Councilor Craig.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure.
Councilor Waddell, I thank you for putting this resolution together. In my view, it is very thorough and well thought out. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilors Diaz or Soto, do you have anything you want to add before I give the mayor an opportunity?
I just want to add, like I stated last week at a committee meeting, I support public art, and there's ways that this community, the city administration, and all involved can work together to come to a complete and a solution that will help everybody out, that would make everybody comfortable in what road we take. It's long overdue in this city, and I support it.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Diaz, anything?
I personally looked at all the emails, and I understand the community that feel that this is a little different, and we do need to look at Lancaster as a whole. People come from all over the world, I would say, and what they come to look for is the Amish community, the farmers market. And I just feel just like 70% of the Lancaster artists and those that are in the community, that I think it's a little bit bold at this point to put something of that sort that's not really going to complement what Lancaster County is really about, or Lancaster City.
Thank you. Mayor, want to give you an opportunity if you had anything you wanted to share. If not, that's fine, but I want to give you just a chance.
I don't have anything further to add. I just want to thank the members of the Public Art Advisory Board, the Historical Commission, counselors, and staff for their time and commitment to doing this. And just to pull the lens back, just to why we're all here. Public art is something that I have learned in my time here in Lancaster City. It's not been something, I didn't grow up with a lot of art influence in my life. I didn't go to museums. It was not part of my growing up experience. In fact, I'm not sure that there was ever an art museum in Juniata County. That said, my coming to this community put me into direct contact and personal relationship with artists. And I got to understand and explore what art actually is. And art is a reflection of all of us. And what public art is essentially is not for a particular socioeconomic status. It is not for a particular skin color, gender, sexual orientation. It is for everyone, and it is to challenge and inspire and help us to understand the world and our community in which we live and the history of our community, as well as to dream about what our future is as a city. And that experience of living in this community with so many artists, many of whom are in this room, and the opportunity to serve on council and participate in the development of the Public Art Advisory Board's strategic plan has made me a fervent supporter of public art and what it means for our community. And this process has been further illuminating to me in my role as mayor to how we can continue to do more public art and to continue to have this kind of rich conversation that I am so grateful for, and to continue to move this conversation forward, while balancing our historic traditions with the future and the storytelling thereof of both our past and our future. So I'm excited to continue to possibly move this forward. And I also know that regardless of this vote tonight, public art is not dying. We have so many opportunities as part of our community planning process to use art as part of our public engagement in the storytelling of what our neighborhoods are, a key part of what the fabric of this community is. And I'm pretty excited about that.
Thank you.
President Reichenbach, can I ask a question?
Yes.
If you'd like, Who left this up here?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Did anybody get to see this? It's MLK. Everybody knows who Martin Luther King Jr. is. We're all good on that. Great. Sorry, please continue.
No. Just a couple quick points because I want to give the public an opportunity to talk. That's why they're here. I will agree on the fact that sometimes when things feel controversial, we feel like it's bad. But this is a packed chamber on a Tuesday night to have a conversation about adding something to our community. That is an inherently good thing. So I think we all need to recognize that this is not a bad thing. This is community engagement at its finest. Like, it's the best. It's the best. And I thank you all for doing it. And regardless of how this comes out, this is how it's supposed to work. We're not supposed to operate in a vacuum. We're not supposed to make decisions without public input. This is literally how it's supposed to be. So I just hope as we go forward, 2020 on, and this chamber goes forward, that there are many decisions that are going to have people in the room like this and really having debates about this. I'll also say that there have been some very spirited conversations about this, but they've been professional, they've been cordial, they've been respectful. Everybody who's walked in this chamber has offered their point and their opinion. They haven't attacked, they haven't denigrated. That's also a good thing. And it feels, in our day and age, uniquely Lancastrian, that we seem to do a very good job of disagreeing with each other in a way that we're not trying to rip each other apart. That is a good thing. So I just hope that you notice that as you look around. This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing, regardless of the outcome. I also want to thank Councilor Smith-Waydell for him, number one, for him offering to, in a way, take it on the chin, which he should not. His commitment to public art and also his commitment to this council and his committee is unquestioned, and the amount of time that he's put in behind the scenes over the last couple months with this project, I wish I could run it down for you, but you would get bored by the time I ran down all the meetings and all the conversations. This man deserves a lot of credit because it matters to him. So regardless of how this goes, he has really gone above and beyond to help counselors get the information they need to understand the concepts and to be able to make an educated decision. So I really do appreciate it, Counselor. Thank you for that. Lastly, I'll just say something that Councilor Grapera brought up. I do think the majority of the feedback that I've received, if it didn't have to do with the actual design, was a concern about who was going to follow through on recommendations if this got approved. The thought process being this is council's last backstop. There's nothing after this. So repeated comments to me were, who do I have faith in after this? Who do I turn to? It goes to nobody else. You guys won't see it again. The Historic Commission won't see it again. Who do we fall back on? I have had those conversations myself, and I believe that the mayor, just like anything that council put forward, council, if this passes, these conditions are binding contractually. So the artists will either have to follow through on these obligations or they will not proceed on the project. This is not a choice that they get to make. So it'll be incumbent on council as well to follow through on those things like other pieces of legislation we pass. But I would also hope, and I believe that's the case because it hasn't been any different, that the administration would be fully in support of that and would follow through as well. Because ultimately, once it gets out of the hands of council, the really only governmental entity that's there to step in would be the mayor's office. So I would hope that it would be something you would follow through on as well. And I would totally imagine that you would. But that's something that I've definitely heard concerns about, and I think that's fair. When the public asks, well, what happens if? What happens next? I think that's a very fair conversation to have. So with that, I want to open it up to the public for comments. I'd ask a couple things. Councilor Smith-Waydell did a great job at the last meeting with this, and I'm going to stick to it. I would simply ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I understand that everybody would like to share, not everybody, but a lot of people like to share their thoughts. If there's something that somebody has said that's exactly your comment, I'm not saying don't speak, but if you feel like you don't have to because somebody represented your point, you may want to do that, but if not, please feel free. The only thing I'll ask is that you come up, you just state your name and the street that you live on, and again, just limit your comments to 3 minutes, and respectful is always the key word here in the chamber. So with that, if people want to line up, if people just want to step up, what I will need you to do is come up to the microphone though, because we can't hear you, and we're actually recording this for the public who can't make it. So if you need to line up, and yes. And before we have a comment, Councilor Smith-Waydell.
Can I have?
Oh, excuse me. I know that was a mistake on my part. Mr. Delfs.
Can I have? Yeah, I would like
Yes.
to have Mr. Delfs, and if he would like to, Mr. Okay, there you are. Mr. Funk,
Yes.
address the body first, if that's okay with
That is my apologies. Sorry about that. That was actually written down. I got a little ahead of myself. And I saw that winking eye of Mr. Dels, and he gave me the signal of, James, you're off track here. Sorry about that. We'll be starting public comment momentarily. Sure. Mr. Dels, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, councilors.
And you are not limited to 3 minutes, sir. But if you'd like to stick there, you can. I'm just kidding. Whatever you need to do, sir.
Well, as you all mentioned, it has been an intense few weeks. I saw my job here tonight partly to frame the conversation, and then we actually jumped right into the heart of the matter. So I think I'm going to modify my remarks on the fly here and make them a little briefer than I originally intended. I'd like to take a shot at summarizing what has happened and where we've landed following several recent public meetings. I wanted to echo the sentiment that I've been really impressed with the rich dialogue that's happened over the last month. Yes, there's been some conflict, but I think that it's all been to the good. Just quick notes on what has happened in the last month. On October 21st, Historical Commission voted to recommend against a certificate of appropriateness for 151 North Queen due to concerns with the public art and citing lack of consistency with the design standards. Then on November 4th, at its committee meeting, City Council weighed the question of granting that certificate of appropriateness for 151 North Queen. And as noted, there were many stakeholders, both for and against the initial public art concept, and they tended to voice their opinions and reflections. Then on November 6th, the Planning Commission voted by unanimous decision to approve 151 North Queen. The Planning Commission issued that decision, but acknowledged that building permits could not proceed until a certificate of appropriateness is issued by council. And then finally, last Saturday on November 9th, the city administration held a public information session to share more context about how public art development happens throughout the world, best practices, and to further explain the selection process for R&R Studios, who is a nationally renowned artist, and then finally to articulate how the design of the artwork is expected to evolve over the next many months. With that, I'd just like to share that I have thought a lot about the dialogue that's occurred over the last month or so. I understand the dilemma that faces the council and the administration that we share. And I think that question is, how do we ensure that the input of our community stakeholders, and particularly our appointed boards and commissions, is fully considered while not handcuffing the creative vision of the artist or dictating the design. At the last committee meeting, we heard Joe Davis speak about how public art is developed and how we do have to provide some agency and license to that artist to fulfill the creative vision. And put differently, I think I would ask that question by saying, how do we expand the tent of participation, community participation, but how do we also honor those people who have already participated? And we want to do that without ultimately delaying the project or bypassing on a once-in-a-generation opportunity to integrate an iconic work of art into our central square. This is really a special opportunity. This doesn't come along very often. We have an opportunity through a public building, essentially a public building, to do something really, really amazing in this location. As Councilor Smith Waddell articulated, city staff, after hearing all of this input from various stakeholders, we put our heads together over the last week and we tried to come up with a plan with R&R Studios, with the artist, to craft a community engagement plan that we could commit to. And we offered that could be a condition of your vote, council, tonight, if you were so inclined to do so. I would note that this is also a relatively unusual thing for an artist to do at this stage of the game. I really appreciate that R&R Studios spent many hours on the phone with Joe Davis talking about the concerns that the community has had, and being willing actually to subject ultimately the aesthetic part of the design concept to a community engagement process that will proceed over the next many months. I just wanted to end by saying that that community engagement process will generally happen in 2 phases. The first phase would focus on clarifying the engineering constraints and the opportunities presented by the building architecture. And then the second phase would focus on refining the creative aspects of the artwork. And so we're talking about the color, the words, if any, certain degree of composition of those materials, and those would be the concepts that the community would be able to weigh in on toward the end of this engagement process. So in answer to this question of, is there a final vote? No, but there is a public engagement process that I would urge us to trust in. If we feel good about the community engagement plan, I feel like that we can get to a really terrific spot that ultimately inspires the residents of Lancaster.
Great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any council questions while Mr. Dels is here? Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
One more quick remark. This relates back to this question about the process related to public art and architectural review. Looking ahead to future projects, I think we probably will run into a situation where we face this nexus of art and architecture again. And I would like to say that the city administration and my department, we're committed to exploring possible ordinance and process changes that could better help us navigate these kinds of situations in the future. There are great cities all over the country that have thriving historic districts and contemporary works of public art that coexist. So these goals are very achievable together, and we just need to make sure that the right procedures are in place.
I'm glad to hear that. And actually, it was going to be a comment I was going to make. I think that it will go a long way to at least having that conversation where we aren't put in a situation again. And you can't plan for everything, and I get that. I've been here long enough to know that. But what you can do is make sure people are communicating with one another. So I would hope that the Historic Commission would be involved, and I'm sure you will do that. But it's good to have that cross-communication during that process to figure out where the holes are and how can we plug them. Because I certainly wouldn't want to put handcuffs on artists going through in the future, because then it's not really art. But on the other hand, we do have a Historic Commission, and they do have a purview, and they do have rules that we've given them. So we have to make sure that we bring them into the process, and I have full confidence that you'll be doing that. So it's great. It's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Sure. Before, again, we go to public, I want to give Mr. Funk and also Ms. Davis, if you have any comments that you want to wait. Mr. Funk, if you have anything you want to share briefly, feel free. And if not, that's okay too. I just don't want to pass the opportunity.
Good evening.
If you can just speak into the microphone, just because it's being recorded. Thank you.
I would like to thank Councilor Smith-Waddell for blowing a huge hole in my prepared remarks this evening. So I'm just going to have to wing it. I think I am speaking more as a private citizen than as a member of the Historical Commission, the comments that I'm going to make. I am gratified by your conditions that there will be, that you're suggesting that there be further review of the design. I am skeptical, though, that R&R Studios is up to the task and is able to respond to your conditions. I've had an opportunity to review their qualifications that were submitted to the city, to the Public Arts Advisory Board, and I've had an opportunity to review their website and their body of work. And I think it's pretty much guaranteed that whatever they present is going to be vertical candy stripes. That's pretty much all they do. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of variety in their work. I also had the opportunity to review the work of the other 5 shortlisted firms, And in my opinion, my personal opinion, they seem to be more qualified. They have a broader range of experience than R&R Studios. And honestly, the only word I can think of is that I'm just befuddled as to why R&R Studios was selected as the firm to do this project. Any one of the other 4 firms, I think, could have done a better job. So I would urge the Public Arts Advisory Board to reopen the selection process and possibly look at another design firm moving forward and not be locked into R&R Studios.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to share anything? Okay. With that being said, we will now go into public comment period. Again, if you could just limit your comments to 3 minutes, your name and your street, specifically about this issue. Mr. Brown, specifically about this issue. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm all right.
All right. And if everyone could please speak as close to the microphone as you can. We are recording, and it's, I think the public would like to hear it as well.
West Chestnut Street. But okay, I can understand what, hey, now you're talking about the art. This is talking about a 6-story parking garage. You ain't saying nothing about that. It came up, then you switched up to art. You changed everything up to art. Art. We're talking about a parking garage. Was it denied or was it not? Now, when the art comes, now the art going to go through. Are you going to bid for the art or are you going to bid for the parking garage?
So I'll jump into this one, President Reichenbach. What we're voting on right now is whether to go to uphold a historic commission recommendation or to overturn it. The Historic Commission, and please feel free to correct me, Mr. Funk, I don't want to mischaracterize you, has been pretty clear that their sticking point in the proposed design of the building at 151 North Queen was this facade, and that with a different proposed facade, they would have recommended the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. I have taken that to mean that, again, from their purview, they were fine with the other design and construction elements of the garage, again, as per Mr. Funk nodding his head, and the minutes. So the sticking point here, we are voting on the whole garage, but I think the sticking point here, and it's obvious to everyone, is the proposed art on the facade.
Yeah, but I know, but where's the art come in the picture? That's a key thing.
So the art has been in the picture for a few months since the administration and the parking authority elected to, and I think this was a good decision on their part, be open to including public art in the design of what really is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to put this in a central building. The art has been part of the process, to my understanding, from late spring, early summer, but again, I'm not looking at anything in front of me, Mr. Brown.
But the key thing now, if you had brought the art up at the meeting with the parking garage, I think the Human Commission probably say something different. If you brought it up, but it wasn't brought up to now.
So it was, there's actually a really interesting history here, Mr. Brown. And I'm going to stop doing this back and forth with you because I can only do it so much poor people get tired of me, which is just to say that there have been multiple proposed facade designs. One came in front of the Historical Commission as part of the conceptual review process that they offer to applicants. And then one came for the one that we're talking about now, came as a concept design to the first meeting where they considered it as an agenda item where they voted on it. But again, that was a couple of months ago. So it's not as though we are just bringing this up tonight, though I'd give credence to the notion that perhaps I would have liked it to be involved in the process a little earlier. But I think that's all I can say about that, Mr. Brown, because I'm not the expert here.
Okay, I can say the final, okay. For me, you're doing a good job one way because they went from one thing to another thing, and you knew with the whole down line, but they don't know nothing about it. But see now, they want them to deny it. I would same thing, uphold it, and don't deny it, and explain that to them about the whole deal, because having something deny that the public really don't know nothing about it's up to the public. If the people wanted to go through, right, and you said no, it's different. But you're doing a good deal. Just keep it up.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, and the key thing for everybody, today is my 63rd birthday.
So I'm going to clap for that, but I feel like you changed the number at the end, because right when you were saying 3, I saw your mouth crunch up. You 63. Come on. Tim. We'll talk about it after. I'm going 67, but that's fine. Potato, it's fine. We're glad to have you, Mr. Brown. Good evening, ma'am.
And I remember you, I used to teach at Washington School many years ago. So
He is well known far and wide. Good evening. If you could just share your name and your street, please.
my name is Barbara Stresko, and I live on Conestoga Boulevard.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm just going to read my letter that I wrote, and it only takes 3 minutes.
Sure.
So. I attended the meeting on Saturday at PCAD about the public art piece for UL Plaza. I was not previously aware of this proposal of public art for this space, so I was glad to have the opportunity to find out more about it. I know the Public Arts Group works very hard and has worked hard to prepare this proposal. After hearing about the process and seeing the slides for the proposal, I was dismayed to learn the proposal is so far along in the process. I have not been in the loop these past months, and I think many other people were also surprised to hear that the artists have already been hired. I have several concerns about the meaning and the piece of public art. It did not seem to me that the meeting allowed adequate time for questions or comments, nor did I find the charrette leaders to be receptive to feedback or suggestions. So I hope you will be willing to hear my thoughts. Since my poem was selected to be engraved in Penn Square, I have had some experience with the public art process. It seems to me the process used for the Penn Square project was a bit more public. There were additional steps taken, such as presenting several choices of poems and allowing public voting in selecting the poem adopted for the square. During that process, there was a great deal of concern that the installation be in keeping with the city's historic nature. I agreed with this goal. I did not want the poem in the square to look like a billboard. And I fear that the piece now presently proposed will look like a billboard. While this project is in a location which is more contemporary, I still think the design should reflect some of the historic architecture of the city. The current design is more fitting for a city like Miami or Las Vegas. And while we want to grow and change, I don't think we want such a busy and bright design next to our library. Mm-hmm. The library should be a place, in my opinion, of reflection and reading. I also have a concern about the words that may eventually be included in the proposed design. The committee doesn't know what words will be used as part of the design, and that is important. They say we can come up with our own words. As a poet, I know this is not an easy task, especially when you must use only a few words to express something that a whole city will approve of, feel in sync with, or feel inspired by for many years to come. It saddens me to ask you to turn down the proposal for the public art, but I feel that I must do so. I have seen the proposal by the local architects, and I think it would make more sense for our city at this time. I love the idea of green space, and we really need more of that downtown, so I hope that is incorporated. I am an art lover, but in this case, I must side with the less intrusive proposal, which allows for people to focus on the words in the books they will take with them from the library. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, ma'am. Mr. Mummert, good evening, sir.
Good evening. George Mummert, Reedy Lane. I am a Lancaster City resident, and I'm appreciative here of this board taking a few minutes to kind of step back and think about the process and see some of the failures there. I think there's a lot more conversation we can have about that. So for people who don't know about me, I am an artist. I do have work in permanent collections in lots of colleges and universities, the U.S. Army, the Coast Guard, Yale University, Smithsonian, lots of places. So I can say something about art. I'm glad that we're taking another look at the overall process and getting, it sounds to me like some of the things that you brought up are getting back to where we were a few years ago when this council approved the money for the 10-year art plan, because without doing those things, I was going to come up here and tell all of you how you contradicted yourself in many ways, that, you know, we spend $20-some thousand on a plan and then it doesn't seem like we're really doing that. So thank you. I'd like to hear more about that as we move along. And I also am a little concerned about what do we do at the point where R&R Studios says, well, we're just not going to do that. I guess we're back at square one. That remains to be seen. So I appreciate you guys taking on this difficult task. If it were talking about just these set of tubes here, I'd say vote no and put $100,000 in 10 different parts of the city. You know, I'd rather do that than spend $1 million on those tubes. So I hope that we can get somewhere else at this point. I'm not a fan of that design in particular, and I don't appreciate that the city would consider putting something in that is already been done somewhere else. Lancaster is a very unique place. We are authentic in many ways, so we don't need to emulate other places. We just need to do our own thing, get our own identity. I think it's time to do that. Personally, I don't think that design in any way is respectful of the Yule legacy or represents the Yule legacy, but I do understand the timing of things, how that all came about. We were talking about renaming the plaza in January, and then somewhere after that, this whole thing came along. A few things that came out of the process that I liked the least, you know, really a committee here just deciding that there wasn't anyone in the county or even in the state really that had those qualifications, so they kind of made this a selective RFQ and not an open one in any way. I just think that's completely wrong. That doesn't sound like any sort of open process or transparency there, and I don't think it's really what the residents would really want. But most importantly, out of all this, despite the fact that I don't care for the artwork, I would really like to see artwork there. We talked about that years ago when we were talking about the 10-year art plan. My biggest concern is the imbalance of dollars here. We're spending more outside of the community, awarding projects to artists outside of Lancaster and outside of Lancaster County in Pennsylvania than we are here in our own community. And that doesn't fit the 10-year plan of empowering artists in the community to make successful public art projects locally, regionally, and nationally. So I think we got to start supporting our own.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Evening, sir.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for representing the public. I do have an issue with the way this process has gone. And the first question I have for everyone is, why is the R&R artists so deep in the project to date? There seems to be, if you're promising us to be patient, wait, let's see what evolves. And I say, if this fellow here from the Historic Commission said there were 5 applicants who got requests for proposal, and that in his humble opinion, of those 5 proposals, the R&R proposal was the least interesting for him. I don't know who he is or what his tastes are all about, but I can assure you that that has more merit to me than you asking us to be patient with an outcome when you're about to sign off and have zero responsibility for it. The other issue is, to whom does the public address concerns after you're out of it? I mean, you're almost meritless sitting here. Are we now going to hoof it down to the Lancaster Parking Authority and talk to their design geniuses? Or how about going out to Benchmark Construction, who was against this idea, and complain to them about what they will and will not do next? Or could we go to the, what's the other people involved, Hamill Associates, who did not like this idea at all and proposed something different? I don't know if what they proposed was better or not. But all I know is that we are not involved in this process. The people who are contracted to be involved in this process are not in this process. And I'm asking you, to whom would we turn for confidence and a surety that something that's going to happen will happen to our tastes and likability? And I don't mean Lancaster County, Amish tastes, which is often the high and low comparison. Because we have Amish here and because we're a conservative community, we don't know Jack. And so going to Miami for R&R is getting pretty darn far away to keep us from having any input. Your point that there's going to be a lot of meetings doesn't mean anything. If we are not in the process from the beginning, we aren't in the process. So to have R&R present to us, and then we weigh in about something, and then R&R shows us something, presumably they would have reacted to our commentary and changed that idea to help us understand what's going on. And then we would comment again, and then they would respond with something. But they've already responded. I mean, you guys have it right there in front of you.
I'll just ask you to finish up your point for fairness of everyone else.
I beg your pardon?
Could you just finish up your point so everyone else? Your 3 minutes are up. So if
Well,
just
you
finish-
guys have it in front of you. I use Martin Luther King because he's a popular figure to everyone. I show in here that this can be projected if there is a wall there that you're of any kind, even if it's the tubes, but with subtle colors rather than, having pointless bright colors, stacked together. But if you can project on this surface, we can install a laser projector. It's not novel. All the apps are there for it. All the technology is there. And we could actually reflect on this wall.
Thank you, sir. I want to be respectful to people behind you.
Text communication and art and design, rather than have a static wall on which we cannot agree.
Thank you, sir, for sharing. Good evening. Hi, you just say your name and your street, please.
Hi, I'm Libby Modern. I live on West End Avenue. I'm really nervous. I don't like to talk in front of people, so forgive me.
You'll be fine.
I feel the need to talk to everyone today because I, as a representative of the public library, was on the selection committee that chose R&R. So I want to give you a little background about that selection and sort of dispel some of the rumors about that and hopefully make people understand the dedication that the selection committee took into choosing this firm to do this. So we were given 15 people extremely qualified. There were people on the selection committee from all different backgrounds. We were not all artists. I am an artist. I am an advocate of public art. I've been on the Public Art Advisory Board when it began, so I'm very familiar with how the process works. My work as an artist is specifically engaged in engaging the public and how we can get the community to give input into our art and how we can communicate to the public about what art is and use art as a medium in order to gain opinion, thought, and change in a community. So when I went into this selection committee, that was the number one thing that I was very, very adamant about. This firm that we select must be engaged in the public. Because of the process, they didn't have much time. They did come here, but the whole reason that I advocated and I thought that they would be good was because of the dedication that they have in the other communities they've worked in. We talked to other projects they've worked in, and all those communities were glowing recommendations about how they had engaged with the community. This piece of art that you're seeing is not the final piece. It's not what's going to happen. It was simply part of a feasibility study to see what could possibly happen. There was always the understanding that they would come back here and engage the public, get all the feedback of what everybody wants. Now, when you're doing public art, you have the public as your client, right? How are you ever going to get everybody to agree on one thing? It's impossible. But what you want to do is do something that's going to engage the public and get them to think differently about the space. One of the things that R&R did was create a space, and one of the main things that they were really really specific about is their ability to allow citizens to imagine the future. I want to also just address some of the things that other people have said that I'm forgetting now. I'm sorry.
Take your time.
I appreciate council for you being here, because by you codifying what will happen and what will be part of this public engagement is part of the process. Art is messy, democracy is messy, opinions are messy, and as someone who works in the public engaging community artwork, opinions and thoughts are messy. And we need a way to be able to codify how that happens, and we need help from council to figure out how that happens. And so I appreciate you bringing in the Historic Commission, bringing in council, and bringing in everyone to find a way moving forward so that we have the best possible outcome here. I want to say that all of us are dedicated to what's going to be best for Lancaster, best for the square. We want to hear what everyone has to say, and I just hope and thank you for being part of this, and I hope that the community continues to be engaged. You are part of the process right now. This is art, and this is what public art is. And it's not always exactly what you see on a piece of paper or on a screen on Facebook. It's what people come here to talk about. And please continue to participate. Please make sure that your voices are heard, and understand that there's a lot of different voices that need to be heard. And please respect them, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And you did great, by the way. You did great. We have quite the lineup coming up here, 1, 2, and 3.
I said, I'm not in there.
Just for the record, I did not say that. I did not say old ones. That came from the gallery.
Do you want to hop in line just for a
Yes.
Is this a quorum? Are we violating sunshine?
I think we are.
Well, I had prepared remarks before I heard this proposed motion, but I'm going to continue with what I
Sure.
said.
If you can just share your name and your street.
I'm Paula Jackson. I live on South Mary Street for 36 years, and I've lived in the city of Lancaster for a few more decades. So some background for the benefit of the people that are in the room, and then I have 5 considerations for City Council. Within the City of Lancaster's Heritage Conservation District, the architectural design of new buildings is subject to the review and recommendation of the Historical Commission and the approval of City Council. Commission is required to base its recommendations in the case of new construction on design standards set forth in the Heritage Conservation District Ordinance. When new buildings are proposed, the Commission encourages applicants to present proposed designs for a conceptual discussion at a regular Commission meeting, providing an opportunity for Commission and public comment and for further design refinement. When the applicant returns with the proposed final design, the Commission will act on a formal recommendation to City Council for either approval with conditions, or recommendation of denial. My 5 considerations for City Council. The architectural rendering presented for conceptual discussion on May 20th was found to be generally acceptable with a few design modifications. Finalization of this design for a Commission recommendation to City Council was anticipated at a future meeting. The architectural design presented to the Commission on September 16th for a formal recommendation to Council was considerably different than the May 20th design, and the applicant did not explain how the brightly covered vertical tubing and other design changes were consistent with the design standards. Number 3, the architectural design of a building can be considered a work of art by an architect. There should be no need to conceal the work of the architect with elements proposed by another design professional. Number 4, because the public art is expected to evolve, the project architect should be permitted to finalize the design and present it for conceptual discussion and return to the Commission for a new recommendation to City Council. An option for the applicant, and we've had this in the past, is to withdraw its current application, thus stopping City Council's 60-day clock, permitting the architect to finalize a design acceptable to the Historical Commission and City Council should cause minimal delay in the project construction schedule. Number 5, the final one. Among the criteria the Artist Selection Committee was instructed to consider is how well would the work of the artist fit into our city and our community. When the submitted facade design has been copied from the artist's work elsewhere, with no consideration of the City of Lancaster design standards, nor of its context within Ewell Plaza, this criterion appears to have been overlooked. In conclusion, if the applicant does not offer to withdraw the application recommended for denial by the commission, City Council is encouraged to accept the recommendation of the Historical Commission to deny the application and to advise the project team to return to the commission with an architectural design consistent with the design standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Mayor, if I may, just for reference, I think, just so council is fully informed, the 60-day clock as it stands gives us until December 21st before a certificate of appropriateness is automatically issued by way of our inaction.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. This is a
Good
recording.
evening.
I can just record that.
Mousy, it's tough to follow Mousy. Rick Gray, 128 North Prince Street for 47 years. I also have extensive notes that I've prepared. I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on where the Public Art Board came from. We started to put public art in every park that we did. The first one, we said we want local artists to do it. And we learned from that public art is a specialized area, because what the local artists did was destroyed by skateboarders, which no one who did public art on a regular basis would do, that recognized that. But we also, as we did it, decided that, well, at that time you had a fairly opinionated mayor about art. That's garbage, that's trash, yeah, I like that. And we felt that it wasn't appropriate for politicians to make decisions as to what's acceptable and what isn't. As shown by this looks like a single hauler trash meeting. You get a crowd this big. But do you like it? Well, I don't really care whether you like it or not, really, and you shouldn't care whether I like it. We set up a board. We tried to get the board as diverse as we could. We let them go to professionals in public art, and we asked them to bring public art forward. Now, the things you proposed tonight sound more than reasonable, and really what you ought to be talking about tonight is procedure and not the art. And I think a lot of people, and you go specifically to it, how it was done, how it should be done, understanding that the precedent for what you do here is going to be what's going to happen in the future. Well, what's the guarantee if it doesn't come back to council? What's the guarantee if it does come back to council? I mean, the mayor is there. According to this, the mayor, the Public Art Board will have to follow a procedure. I hope it isn't too long that it would delay construction. But if you look at our current garages, Duke Street, Prince Street, South Duke Street, God knows there's a lot of room for improvement there, and hopefully this wouldn't replicate anything along those lines. So watch the procedure you're setting. Don't involve, in my opinion, don't involve yourself, do you like it or don't you like it, because you know the old saying, I don't know anything about art, but I know what I like, is generally very true. Most people know what they like, but they don't know anything about art. So again, watch the procedure. I think from what I could gather, and the mayor supports it, I think what you've proposed allows a lot of public input. It allows people to say things before it happens. Doesn't mean that they'll be followed. I mean, if we wanted to put the Mona Lisa up on display, there'd be some people that say it's garbage. Other people that say it's the greatest work of art. But allow the procedure, have the procedure the way that you've proposed it, and move on. And let the people, if you don't trust the Public Arts Board, then replace the people that are on it. Really, that's the issue. Even the Historic Commission, the chair of the Historic Commission comes forward and basically says it would have been approved except for the public art on it. Well, you know, I'm not really sure why the Historic Commission's in Lancaster Square. I could make the argument that the Soviet brutalism architecture that's there right now should be preserved as an example of what you shouldn't do. So again, I'd say your proposal sounds reasonable. It sounds like an opportunity for people to say their piece, to have things said, to get it in front of the public, and really, hopefully, to come up with something that some people will like, some people will hate, and 20 years from now, it'll be Lancaster Square. That's Ewell Square. It'll be what we remember. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I gotta say, just because we're not terribly concerned about time anyway, I would watch Mayor Gray talk while Mayor Morris reacts in the background for hours.
Counselor, I love you too.
I think my favorite part of that is the mayor saying, I don't like art, and you're right behind him. And I'm like, I'm assuming he means art in general
name
and
is
not art, but
Art
there's just
Morris,
so
and
much
I
we
love
could do
art.
it.
434 West Chestnut Street.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening. This is less about art, however, and more about procedure and following the ordinance that's been established. But before I do that, I do want to do a shout out to the people here on poverty, because I live and dream for the day when this council is talking more about assisted housing and getting jobs for people than about other things. And I'm sincere about that. We do not in this community, we spend hours with staff on bicycle lanes and all kind of other things. And $160 million committed to that in this county. And what's committed to assisted housing? So I grew up in abject poverty right after World War II in England on rationing. And I feel for you. And I think what is happening in this community is not good. We could do much, much better. But I will return to late September 2018, a little over a year ago. Members of the Ewell Legacy Committee met with Charlotte Katzenmoyer and Joe Davis. We presented our idea of locating a Barney Ewell statue in Lancaster Square, now Ewell Plaza. We told Charlotte and Joe that we had performed research and felt that a bronze statue would cost about $80,000 to $90,000 and that we would raise the funds for it. Ms. Davis, in my opinion, quickly informed us that a permanent statue would not be in keeping with the goals of the Public Arts Advisory Board. She encouraged us to develop an art proposal that could change annually, possibly with Barney Ewell as the inspiration for annual art exhibits. When I listen to what is now proposed for Ewell Plaza, I wonder why a 6-foot-high, life-size statue of our famous Barney Ewell, a wonderful, gentle person, does not fall within the goals of the board, but a permanent piece of artwork measuring 72 by 160 feet does. Why the double standard? I don't get it. In regard to this proposed art, let me say that we should not be here trying to find a resolution this evening. The city of Lancaster has unnecessarily created this conflict. Once the art board decided to allow the artist design to be integrated into the structure, and this is the key element, you can talk all about design and we shouldn't interfere in art and this is not what the issue is for you. Once the art board decided to allow the artist design to be integrated into the structure, the design had to be compatible with the standards of the Historic Commission, these folks. The Public Art Advisory Board and the Historic Commission are both staffed, believe it or not, by city employees. A key function of city staff is to comply with and work within the standards and laws set by council and the mayor. It's what requires people to be treated equally, to follow those rules you set up or change them by ordinance. How can you change for one and not for another? It doesn't make sense to me. The ordinance governing the Historical Commission was developed thoughtfully and transparently, beginning with the Stork administration, a Democratic administration, and ending with the Smith-Gold administration, a Republican administration. Combined, develop these standards. The ordinance should be followed and not overlooked or marginalized. This is not a waiver of the material on a small dormer window. This is much bigger than that. The members of the Historical Commission took their time last week to explain in great detail their guidelines. They were very gentle about it, direct about it, informed about it, and I think outstanding. Their explanation was thoughtful and transparent, integrating this 72 by 160 foot design into the structure of the garage without complying with the Historical Commission grossly violates the intent of the ordinance and should not be permitted by City Council. It is categorically wrong. It is not about art. It's following these folks' work on a major subject matter. And I ask you to support what they recommended to you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
My name is John McGrand, I live in West Chestnut Street, and I serve on the Public Art Advisory Board. I'm not going to be long-winded. I don't think we've covered a lot of territory tonight. What I would say is a couple things. First of all, the things that we're striving for, that we're talking about tonight, is a fulfillment of goals laid out in our 10-year plan, and that was approved. I've been on the board for a little bit more than 3 years. That was approved shortly after I joined the board. And at the time, I mean, a lot of people really, we celebrated that 10-year plan. It included a couple priorities that are, featuring public art in Lancaster Square, as it was called at the time, and seeing public art incorporated into architectural work. So, I mean, at the time that we approved that plan was welcomed. It was celebrated at a couple of really great events, and I think we're really proud of that. We're a young organization. We're learning more all the time, and we're always figuring out how to do things better. I feel confident that we would have embraced a public input process without the steps that we're taking tonight, but I think that they're good steps as well. I think that if that binds us to a process that gives everybody some assurance that we're going to follow the process that ought to be followed, I think that's a good thing. And to the comments that I've heard throughout the night, how will we, how can we have accountability? How can we continue to have input? We meet every Monday or every month on the second Monday at 5 o'clock. We would love, I can, in the 3 years that I've served on the board, I think that we've had one public comment that I can remember. I think I speak for myself. I won't speak for the board. I would love to see more public participation. Please come to our meetings. We're a community that's proud of our history of art and proud of the way art has helped our city thrive. And we don't have people attending our public art board meetings. Come to our meetings. We have opportunities to serve on our board. Let us know that you'd like to do that. We'll see if, and we would love to, we have openings on our board at this time. So please come. You have, if I understand the process correctly, this is going to unfold between now and September. Is that what I heard you say?
December 21st.
Pull it back up.
December 21st.
I think you're asking about next year with the public
Yes,
meetings
I'm sorry.
rolling out. Yes.
The plan as
with
as
R&R.
written, the two phases. The second phase ends through September 2020, at which point they will have presented multiple designs to be voted on by community members. But again, that's just in the version that exists in the motion I've proposed.
So in addition to the public sessions that are prescribed by that process, we will meet 9 or 10 times from between now and then. Come and tell us what you think. We would be glad to have you.
Great. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Good evening.
Hello, my name's Anita Pilgerton Plum. I live on West James Street. I was not planning on speaking, but I just had a couple of things. I'm very, very appreciative of the work of Councilmember Smith Waddell. I think it goes above and beyond, and it's brilliant, actually, in offering, not necessarily a compromise, but a way to hear lots of voices. I'm also appreciative of the public art process and understand why it's confusing to people. It's different than a traditional process in which one or a couple of groups of people in power make a decision for a community. And it's an important process because it engages people who otherwise wouldn't be engaged. It's an opportunity to get young people and disenfranchised people to invest in where they live, and that makes our city better. I don't look at the sample that's been shown in the newspaper and say, I like that art. In fact, I'm not sure I do like that art, but I also know that that's not what the final outcome is going to look like, so I'm not worried about that. On Saturday at the community meeting at PCAD, I was most impressed by Joe Davis's comment about the importance of the artists being Latinx, and that means the art may end up looking more Latin than the traditional architecture here in Lancaster, but then that would look like Lancaster, and in my opinion, that would be a very good thing. Thank you for your support of public art and the conditions that help create some assurances that the artists engage in a public art process.
Thank you for sharing. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Moira Jean Fitzgerald, and I sent you all a couple of questions earlier today. The number one question is, I got to read the proposal that R&R put forth, and their estimate for the west facade was $800,000, and I've heard Larry Cohen speak publicly more than once, saying that the facade would cost $600,000, no matter what was included in the facade. So my question is, which is it? And who would hold R&R responsible for staying within that budget? I understand we've already floated a $29 million bond to pay for the construction of this garage, and that we're counting on $1.5 million per year for the next 20 years, beginning next year, to pay this bond back. And that's going to be CRIS money, which we hope comes forward. So as a resident of the city, I'm concerned about the budget. I'm concerned about the lack of accountability. In the R&R proposal, it said very clearly that their say goes, no one else's. It is their art. You can't tell them what to do. It's their conception, their vision. However, we're supposed to be telling them to do it for $600,000 instead of $800,000. And then that doesn't even include the other corners that were going to cost $350,000. So the proposal was over $1 million. Who's going to hold the budget, and what is the numbers going to be?
Thank you, ma'am.
If you have an answer, I want to hear it.
No, yeah. Can I get Chris, Larry, somebody to give me like a definitive answer on that? Just in front of the whole body? Somebody, I don't care who it is. Yeah. Hey, Larry, thank you.
Hello. Larry Cohen from the Parking Authority. The budgeted amount for the artwork is equal to 2% of the budget for the project, which is approximately under $30 million. So the budgeted amount for the art is $600,000.
And just to answer the rest of Ms. Fitzgerald's question, what happens if R&R comes back and says, well, we think it's going to be $720,000 actually? Humor me.
So in the one meeting that we had with R&R, we were fairly adamant that cost was an issue with the project, and they should take cost into consideration when developing their feasibility study. Like any vendor, like any project, there will be a negotiation. That if they do come in at $800,000, the budget's at $600,000, we'll need to negotiate and figure out a way to cut he either has to go one way or the other. We either have to fund more and find the funding to do it, or we need to do, they need to do changes to bring it into budget.
Okay. So just to be clear, you're not going to be, I don't mean this to sound combative, though I know that it does. You're not going to be standing in front of me a year from now telling me about why this project cost $1.1 million. This particular piece, like the facade piece. Just because I keep getting from multiple people this $800,000 and the $350,000. I just want to know that what we're talking about in some kind of secure fashion is in fact $600,000, and it's not going to be a year from now. It's going to be $1.1 million. Just so we're all straight on the facts.
Yeah, I mean, the Parking Authority, we've been very consistent from day one that our preliminary budget was $600,000 for the project. So if they're coming in greater than that, as I said, they will have to figure out a way to work into that budget, or there will have to there'll have to be a way for additional funding to cover it. Our intention is, with all the pieces that are being bid, all the cost for this project, that they will need to figure out a way to stay within budget.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.
I feel like I
Thank
hear
you.
you warming up over there, Mayor.
Yes, just to underscore the fact that the budget that was presented with R&R was based on a conceptual design. It is not the final design. The final design will be built within a budget of $600,000. There is no wiggle room on that. There is no come back to council. There is no other money laying
Right.
around for this. This was money, the reason I think why this is an opportunity and why art integrated into architecture is that there is not a budget for public art. This is integrated into the construction of the building. If this wasn't there, there would be some other element that would cost $600,000. This is a one-for-one exchange for the screening that would go over the front of the garage. There are stipulations related to that screening. It cannot be a wall. It has to be ventilated. It has to withstand certain wind, all of these other things that are part of the architectural and engineering that needs to also go through a process in addition to the public art. So I just want to restate that because there's questions about this, the budgeted money, and we are setting the budget. Not us here. The Lancaster Parking Authority, in consultation with Walker, who builds garages, in consultation with Benchmark Construction, which is what is the term du jour?
Project manager.
They're the project manager, but they're also assuming all of the risks.
Construction manager at
the
risk.
construction manager and risk for meeting the budget. Is that
Right.
correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So just to clarify, you're giving me your word, Mayor Sarachi, that we will stay within the $600,000 budget, even though the conceptual proposal came in at $800,000. And I would just have one brief question to follow up. If the $1.5 million CRIZ money doesn't come through for the next 20 years, who does that debt fall on?
Thank you,
Or the
ma'am.
bond?
Thank you. Appreciate your public comment. It's not it's not a back and forth. I will allow her to answer if she has the time, but I want to give other people a public comment period as well.
On to that.
So, Mr. Dels, if you want to comment, or Mr. Cohen?
Just wanted to clarify one part of the question.
Thank you.
The initial concept rendering from R&R Studios that we're all familiar with, that was created before R&R Studios was given a final budget. So they'll have to work within the $600,000 budget that they were provided.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen?
And for clarification, the debt is of the parking authority. The parking authority issued bonds of $29.5 million. So the burden is on the parking authority to pay that debt with the support of the CRIZ dollars.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for answering the question. Sir, thank you for being patient.
Absolutely. Thank you for running such a fantastic meeting. My name is Jeremy Walk. I live on West Grant Street. I'm a local artist and a local art professor. I spoke just over a week ago to the council at that time, and my statement is brief. Thank you so much for putting together, and very quickly, might I add, such a thorough and wonderful way to integrate such differing opinions and allowing us to move forward, with what is a watershed moment in public art in this city, and a wonderful roadmap for us to work further moving forward. The opportunity presented for you all to consider tonight is something that we can learn from, we can grow from, we can move forward, we can be really respectful of the past while not dismissing opportunities for the future. And I just want to thank you so much for wonderful leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one quick point of clarification on the parking authority paying the debt. It is guaranteed by the city, just so you know that. So it's just one point. I'm not suggesting they won't be able to fulfill that, but it does have a city guarantee.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Morris.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Susie Hoover from East King Street.
Just one quick thing. I'm glad to hear that this conceptual thing may not be the last piece of art that will appear. As soon as I was at a parking authority meeting when I saw the presentation, and I went home and Googled R&R, and I went to the hallway bottom of the page and found that design with those rods was already used at the airport in Rhode Island on their parking garage. So to me, it looked exactly like the same, so we got a repetitive presentation of something that had been created for the Rhode Island project. So I hate to have us, we're not an airport and we're in a city. I would really like to see something different than what was presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello, my name is April Copenhaver. I'm founder and owner of Mulberry Art Studios. My address is 19-21 North Mulberry Street, and I look at all of you, and I'm happy to see lots of friends. Couple of things. Number one, 32 years ago when I started Mulberry Art Studios, zoning committee didn't even know what an art center was. Okay, there was nothing on the books really even for a gallery. They wanted to know how many people I was going to employ. And I spoke to them and I said, you know, artists are unique, and we're about to transform the city. And my vision was to bring all the different arts under one roof. And I'm very proud of our city. And in fact, when this building needed to be ADA compliant, a gallery was added as part of Mayor Gray's design. So now even our city office has a gallery. But I want to say that our artists are unique and extremely talented, and don't underestimate them. And when I heard at the meeting at the Pennsylvania College of Art and Design this past weekend that none of our artists were qualified to submit a proposal, I was very offended by that, because I know George Mummert does have pieces at the Smithsonian, and that is definitely public art. And I was offended by the meeting saying we want public opinion and we want to hear what you have to say, and we will give you 60 seconds to say it in. And I know for myself, I've given 32 years of my life to this city. And my rewards are seeing the success of our city. It's no longer just lawyers' offices, and that's what it used to be. But there's thriving restaurants, there's thriving places. People want to live in the city. Young people are buying houses in the city. They're having their children raised in the city because of the ethnicity, diversity, and the quality of life that they're receiving. That was not to be taken for granted. That was a dream 32 years ago. It took a lot of people to make that happen. And we branded the city as a city authentic, okay? And I also say a city unique. So we don't want public art to look like an airport or to be seen anywhere else in the world, because Lancaster is unique. It is a diamond. It's not even a diamond in the rough. It's just a diamond with many facets. And I always tell people that come to Mulberry for weddings, and they've been people from around the world, including Tanzania, Eritrea, Singapore, China. And it's not that they're coming just to Lancaster, they're coming to Mulberry Art Studio. So we help put you on the map. And to be shut down at a public meeting and be told that you have 60 seconds or go to the back and write a sticky note on a board, I was offended, and I'm still offended for days. And then I kind of took a grasp of this. Maybe it's a difference in generation. When I was told that there would be public dialogue, it would look like a meeting like this. Everyone has been extremely professional, extremely respectful of each other, whether we agree or we not, but we give each other a breath to speak, and 3 minutes, we can do it. But 60 seconds, you gotta be kidding me. And I don't even know if 5 people were called on. So it was an attempt, but it was to me a disingenuous attempt. So when I love what you put into it, sir. I mean, I think you put a lot of thought into it from Saturday to now, okay? And I did not draft something as complete as yours. But how do we know we will be given opportunity and really have the artists listen to us? And if we're branding a city authentic, if we're branding historic downtown Lancaster, when you're driving into the city, what are the sounds? The signs do not say downtown Lancaster. It says historic downtown Lancaster. So this piece of public art has got to reflect so many parts of what our city is about. I would love to invite these artists that I know and love to stand up and say, what their creative ideas are. I'm even confused about this $600,000 budget. Does that include the construction, or is that the design fee? Can anybody explain that? Is that the nuts and bolts plus their design fee, or is that's the nuts and bolts and their design fee?
Yes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
If I could just have you finish up, I don't want to interrupt.
Okay, thank you. We're all here because we love our city. We care. If we didn't care, we'd be at home, right? All of us. All of you have given thousands of hours. So have we. Thousands of hours. Randy Harris, how many more hours could he give to our city about historic Underground Railroad? God bless him. And he was interrupted and cut off at the knees with what he had to say. So we need some clarification is what does a public dialogue really consist of? And please don't have it on 5 people in the back to go talk to privately with sticky notes, please. That's not what my generation grew up with.
Thank
and
you.
I don't think that's how we grew our city.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi there. Carolyn Carl. I live on Woods Avenue. And I so appreciate all of this chat about process, design, public art, communication, public input.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you just speak closer to the microphone? I just want people at home to be able to hear you. Sorry.
Public input. But at the end of the day, we are talking about a 7-story wall in a public square at the on top of the library. And I think that forever is a really long time for a colorful neon or just a colorful 7-story high wall. That's it.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hey. So,
if you could just share your name and your street, please.
Yeah, Tammy, West Vine Street. So I'm listening to these things about the budget, which feels like there's some very little guarantee that if the money from CRIS doesn't come through as hoping and expecting, that then the money falls on the city. So what does that mean? Taxpayer money? And
I just want to interrupt. I don't want to interrupt you. I'll let you finish, but that's not what was said. What was said was the parking authority is responsible for it. That is guaranteed by the city, but that guarantee has never been called. So I just want to clarify that it does not fall on
I'm
the
trying to understand all
Sure,
that.
that's
yes.
okay. No, I just want to make sure that didn't get out.
I guess I'm just many things around this that I'm just really concerned about, and I'm hearing everyone kind of discuss and worry about what kind of art projects should go on this building, when I know that at the last meeting, we have expressed many other more serious concerns around that, what's going on down at that plaza. And none of that was even acknowledged or addressed, so that's very hurtful. I remember when I first heard about this idea of this library, it was when we stood in this very room, a bunch of poor people, and we expressed concerns about the closing of the old St. Joe's Hospital. And when it came time for all of y'all to make remarks that day, there was someone that only harped on the fact of a beautiful, fancy library. I just feel like there hasn't been enough real thought put into this, and that if there's a way to actually literally just put this whole thing on pause and not vote on it tonight, I honestly just feel like that's the best thing to do, so that there is more guarantee put into place, and that this artist maybe needs to put something in writing that in fact that this agreement will be said to before anything's actually voted on. I think it's fair. That's the only fair thing actually to this public. I think we've been let down enough, and we're just getting kind of tired of it.
Thank you. Professor, good evening.
Hi, my name is Antonio Colari. I work in the city. Sometimes I park in the city. Sometimes I get parking tickets in the city, which I'm happy to pay. I know it goes for a good cause, it's supposed to. You just were saying that if the CRIS money doesn't come in, it's not the city that is responsible for it, but it's the parking authority, assuming that the guarantee would never be called up. But is it, my impression is, or is it in the form of a question, would the parking authority then be able to just raise fines or parking fees, which would impact adversely on the economic conditions of people in the city, especially poor people in the city, or the people who have a problem paying parking tickets? They already have gone up quite significantly. So if the CRIS money doesn't come in, does that mean that the parking authority is likely to increase parking fines and parking rates even more than it already has? I mean, you clarified the issue, right?
Yes, I did. And when we get to council comments, we can answer, but I'm not going to have an open dialogue with you because that wasn't fair to everybody else. So if you want to express your questions, feel free to, and then we can answer them when we get to council
I did
comments.
ask the question, yeah.
And I will answer them when we get to council comment. But again, I didn't have an open dialogue. It's not fair to other
No,
residents.
since you raised the point, I just wanted to be clear.
I'll be happy to get to it when we get
Thank
to
you.
public. Sure, you're welcome. Thank you for coming out, Professor. I don't want to limit anybody's opportunity, but I think we might have been 75+% people comment. That's pretty amazing. So thank you all for doing that. And I hope that you feel welcomed enough in this chamber going forward in the future that you can always come and express those thoughts, whether we agree to disagree. Literally, it's our job to sit here and listen and to take those thoughts into account. So you are sincerely appreciated, and that goes for everybody. We need to hear the truth up here because we hear from a lot of people from time to time, but we need to hear from the public directly to our face. And it is very welcomed. So thank you all for that. Without further ado, before we move to a vote, I want to clarify two things. One, I want to clarify what's on the table. You don't have to reread it because I think we remember it. But an aye vote would be in support of issuing a certificate of appropriateness and allowing the project to go forward. A no vote would be denying a certificate of appropriateness and upholding the Historic Commission recommendation. So a aye vote is to approve. Just to clarify, is everybody clear on that? An aye vote is in support of Councilman Smith-Waddell's. Councilor Soto, is there confusion on it? I just see you look. I want to make sure we clarify.
No, you answered it for me.
Okay, I just want to make sure. The other thing I wanted to mention too, and I was remiss in saying it, and I should have, and look, I had to shut myself up. See? Set timers for me too, especially when it's late. I just want to thank the mayor and particularly Jess King over the last week, who has spent a tremendous amount of time as well, conversating with council members, educating council members, having open dialogue with council members about a wide variety of issues. It's very much appreciated, Jess and the mayor as well, and was extremely helpful. And I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier, but it was absolutely helpful and very well done. So thank you for that, both of you. So with that, again, a reminder, an aye vote is to support Councilman Smith-Waddell's resolution to allow the project to go forward. A no vote is to deny the certificate of appropriateness, and the project in the current form will not go forward. Are we okay with that? There certainly is a way to table that. That's up to a council member to do, not for me to do. Right now, there's a motion on the table, and that has to be voted on first. So again, a yes vote is to allow the project to go forward. A no vote is to stop the project. Is everybody okay with that? Because we've had some confusion in the past. I know it can be a little tricky.
President Reichenbach?
Yes.
I just want to clarify two things.
Sure.
First, I do want to reiterate that that our vote tonight does constitute all the legal force and authority that council can offer, and creates conditions to the certificate of appropriateness. The applicant moving forward from this point, if we were to vote aye, which is not a presumption, is in fact a legal agreement to the conditions that we have set forth, and should not be understood as anything less than that, either by the public or indeed by the applicant themselves. Secondly, I just do want to just let council know what the timeline is. To Jerry's point, if somebody wishes to move to table, if somebody wishes, that our first consideration being interpreted to be October 22nd, we have until the third Saturday in December to produce a vote on this measure, up or down, before a certificate of appropriateness is issued automatically as per the ordinance. Just want to clarify both of those things.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, with that being said, we will call for a vote. Unless there's more council comments, would you like to make comments? Sure. Counselor Diaz.
I'd like to recommend to table it, since there's so many contradictions and so many different type of information that we were not, we were just not given. I mean, at the last moment, when I received a phone call that this was going to be actually brought up, I just felt like I was rushed to make a decision. And after listening to the public, I feel that we owe it to the public to table it at this moment in case there were some other things that need to be looked at.
Are you presenting that as a motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So is there a second for a motion to table? Going once? Going twice? I hear no motion to table, so there will be no motion to table. There's currently a motion on the table for an up or down vote on the recommendation from the Historic Commission. Councilman Smith Waddell's recommendation with conditions of an aye vote to allow the project to go forward with those conditions. An aye vote is in support of that. A no vote is not in support of that. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
No.
Mr. Gruppera.
Aye.
Mr. Smith Waddell.
Aye.
Mr. Soto.
Aye.
President Reichenbach.
No. So the motion passes 4-2. The project will move forward. Thank you very much, everybody, and for the fruitful comment. Sincerely appreciate it. We will move on to the rest of our agenda this evening. The first thing we have is an ordinance for first reading, Administration Bill number 16, 2019. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, establishing appropriations of $600,000 of property sale proceeds received in 2019, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect as provided by Pennsylvania law.
And before we make a motion, this is a first reading, so we won't be acting on this evening. And on behalf of Councilor Ballantyne, Councilor Gruppera, I believe Mr. Hopkins, if you wouldn't mind coming up and giving some context, as I just put this on Councilor Gruppera's plate an hour ago.
I appreciate that.
Sure. And if you don't mind speaking a little louder, because we have a little bit of a change in the room, so just the people at home can hear it.
And here I thought everybody was here for this issue.
Aren't they always here for your issues?
And if you could, we are on Bill number 16, correct? Okay.
We are.
Thank you. Okay, so Bill number 16 is a supplemental appropriation, so it's an ordinance which is essentially appropriating additional dollars that were unanticipated to be received by the city when the 2019 budget was passed. The appropriation itself is coming from funds that we received in 2019 from Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology, and it was the last part of the purchase price agreement for the properties on Chesapeake Street that the city originally received when the Armory closed. The city received those properties with a deed reversal that came to the city. The city subsequently sold those properties to Thaddeus Stevens College so that they could construct the Griner Center that's there on that site now. The second part of that sales agreement was that they would pay an additional $1 million beyond what they originally paid us several years ago. So in 2019, they've actually so far paid $860,000 of that $1 million. We are seeking an appropriation of $600,000 of that $860,000 to be appropriated to the 2018 Capital Improvement Fund for use to renovate the former water transmission and distribution property on Beaver Street into a city storage facility. We're moving, have the need to move a lot of things that are stored at the Fairview Avenue Streets Garage. You all have been in that building. You know exactly what the conditions are in that building, and that it is maybe one of the least conducive to storage buildings in the city of Lancaster. So we are looking to renovate that property on Beaver Street, so taking that Beaver Street property and basically, repurposing it as an asset from water T&D to general storage for the city of Lancaster.
Great. Thank you. Questions from council? Again, this is the first reading, so we will not be voting on that. We'll be voting at our next council meeting later in November. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. We will move on to resolutions that will all be voted on this evening, unless something unique happens. Administration Resolution Number 61, 2019, authorizing acceptance of a PennDOT Green Light Go grant. Mr. Harris.
That is the title, Mr. President. A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster accepting a Green Light Go grant.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Councilor Gapera.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Cindy McCormick was at the committee meeting to go into detail about resolution number 61. She said that the city was awarded a green light grant for the purpose of retiming the city's traffic signals and adding detection sensors at some locations. She said the city now has a decades-old signal timing plan. Grant funds will be used to collect data and develop multiple timing plans. Those plans could respond to the traffic flows at different times of the day or other situations. The sensors would monitor traffic volumes and allow the signals to respond to conditions. The city's 20% match to the grant would amount to an additional $155,000 for the project. Implementation would likely take 6 months to a year.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Gapera. Council comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Gapera?
Aye.
Mr. Smith-Waddell?
Aye.
Mr. Soto?
Aye.
President Reichenbach?
Aye. Move on to Administration Resolution Number 62, 2019.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster requesting a multimodal transportation fund grant of $660,450 from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation to be used for neighborhood transportation improvements.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion and second. Councilor Gapera.
Ms. McCormick also said that the request to PennDOT will be for the funds to improve wayfinding signage and pavement markings for bicycle transportation network and improvements at some intersections. The grant requires a 30% city match. The total project costs $943,550.
Thank you. Council comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Gapera?
Aye.
Mr. Smith-Waddell?
Aye.
Mr. Soto?
Aye.
And President Reichenbach?
Aye. Move on to Council Resolution Number 63, 2019.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster reappointing Rudy De Laurentiis, 430 North Duke Street, to the City of Lancaster Zoning Hearing Board for a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2020.
I hear a motion. Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Councilor Diaz.
I actually I wasn't here, but it looks like it's a reappointment.
Yeah, I believe,
zoning hearing.
I do remember this one. I think because the zoning hearing board is unique in the fact that it requires a council resolution, is that correct? In terms of the appointment? I believe that's the case.
Yes,
which
Mr.
is why it
President,
was,
it's required under the Pennsylvania Municipal
right.
Planning Code.
That's why it's set out outside of the ones that were mentioned earlier. Any council comments on the reappointment from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Gapera?
Aye.
Mr. Smith-Waddell?
Aye.
Mr. Soto?
Aye.
President Reichenbach?
Aye. Administration Resolution Number 64, 2019.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster appointing Mayor Dussel to provide professional services in conjunction with the city's independent fiscal audit for the years ending December 31st, 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Councilor Grapera.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to call up Mr. Hopkins for the next two resolutions, please.
You know, you can sit closer if you don't want to make that long walk. Just feedback.
It's the long walk. I love it. Okay, so resolution number 64, as we discussed at the meeting last Monday, is for the appointment of the city's auditor that performs the city's independent audit each year. This is actually under the third-class city code is the appointment of city council of the auditor. Mayor Dussel has been the city's auditing firm since 2004. Actually, there was a firm called McConley and Asbury that Mayor Dussel was absorbed into Mayor Dussel. So the same folks from that firm have been doing the audit since that time. The increase in the contract for the auditing services for these 3 years is a 3% increase each year. That said, when we look back over that entire time that either McConley and Asbury or Mayor Dussel has been doing the audit, the increase at 2021 will be an average of about 1.5% increase each year for that entire time period. So I think the pricing is very reasonable. We're able to keep the price of our audit very reasonable because of all of the work that the accounting staff does before the auditors even walk in the door. Essentially, they're doing an internal audit and hand those work papers over to the auditing firm. As you know from the presentations we've had year in and year out, we've had no change audits, which in the complicated nature of our financial structure is quite an accomplishment for that staff. So Mayor Dussel would have this appointment for 2019, 2020, and 2021. The only thing I want to add there is that one of the tenets of Mayor Dussel's work is that they change the manager of the audit every several years. So Jen Kruver-Keevy, who had been the manager of this audit for about 4 or 5 years now, has moved into a partnership role, so there'll be a new individual assigned as the manager of this audit. And the idea is that every several years there's a fresh set of eyes on the city's books, so it's not the same people asking the same questions and doing the same testing that they have turnover. So again, the appointment of the auditors for 19, 20, and 21 is what this resolution is for.
Great.
Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Sorry, President Reichenbach.
No, I was just going to go to you. Go ahead.
Why 3 years?
3 years, frankly, it's been the history of what we have done in terms of the agreements. If there is ever a changeover in the auditing firm, that in and of itself, like 1 year of that changeover is significant because you're essentially handing off a whole set of financial history off to another auditing firm. There is no actual magic to that 3-year term. It's not a term laid out in the third-class city code or anything like that. It's when we do our labor contracts, we do 3-year contracts. Again, no magic to it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Other comments from council? I'll just say I've been lucky enough to experience working with Mayor Dussel for the years that I've been on council, and they've been nothing but extremely professional, fantastic at what they do, and so open to feedback and questions from council members. And the amount of information that we're provided that's able to break down what is a very big audit is phenomenal, in my opinion. They're top notch. So I think it's a great decision. Any comments from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Rivera?
Okay.
We're good.
It's gone.
You're good. You're good.
Sorry, Mr. Harris. Continue, sir.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Rivera?
Aye.
Mr. Smith-Waddell?
Aye.
Mr. Soto?
Aye.
And President Reichenbach?
Hi. The other issue we mentioned was brought up in committee, but has not yet been added to agenda. It'll be coming up at our next committee meeting, or council meeting. Sorry about that. We'll move into our second public comment period. It's open for comments about issues that are not on tonight's agenda, just to reiterate that we won't be relitigating those. But if you do have a public comment about something not on the agenda this evening, you're welcome to come up. I'd ask again that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and just share your name and your street.
My name's Terry Brown. I want West Texas City.
It's for the mayor. Now, you're telling the fire department that they need a bid. A bid can come from anybody. See, a bid to have a construction done, right? Demolish done on 1 and 3. But we passed this bid last year. Remember, they voted on and it's passed. Now, how come there is no construction done?
I'm just going to answer this, if that's okay, President Reichenbach.
Mayor, you have the floor.
The reason why we requested new construction bids for the construction of stations 1 and 3 is that the first round of pricing that came back was very high and exceeded our budget. We went back and did extensive value engineering to reduce the cost of the construction by making changes to the fire stations themselves, and we are rebidding them in entirety to save money.
Okay.
They will begin construction in 2020.
Okay, when 2020?
I do not have that information at the top of my, right here, but I would be happy to get that to you, Mr. Brown. You can call my office and leave a message with Bernie with your phone number, or you can leave it with Mr. Harris, the other Bernie, and someone will call you back.
Yes, because see, I've been trying to fight down a lot back and forth, and they're telling me a bid, right? A bid can come from. Now I don't know what bid that you went to.
There are legal processes that we must follow to bid public projects because it involves public money.
I know it's public money, but see, you can get a bid from any contractor and just say, but it all depends how much money that they're asking for. Because every bid they get down the line, it always is one bid. You get the money then, but when it start, the contract is so high. The Lancaster City Police Station was only $90 million. But when it got done, right, it was $195 million when it started. When it started, it was only 90. Just like when Mayor Gray built this here, it was low. But when he got finished, he just got it down the line, just get it started. And do like every other mayor do, just get it started. Because the money-wise, because they're going to ask you the money-wise. And by you, money-wise, they want to tell you a big higher number. He said, no, so you got to find some low. Just find a contractor, right, who's willing to do the job.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay. Or I can go down to Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, and get you a contractor to come up here, or Harrisburg, somebody that I know who does construction work, and give you a nice good bid. Then it's up to you and the city how you're going to pay it or not.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Appreciate you sharing. Any other public comments this evening? Hearing none, I'll go to the, sorry, sir. Absolutely. Come on up. Sorry about that. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Gephardt. I am on North Lime Street. So this city has a very serious problem with housing. In this city, someone earning the mandated federal minimum wage of $7.25, which is the minimum wage in the state of Pennsylvania, would be required to work 84 hours a week to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Lancaster. The gap between the wages and the rents in Lancaster have doubled since the 2009 recession. It is the absolute failure of this city and the ability of which that it has to project the public will of its citizens to provide a basic fundamental human right, which is the right to housing. Lancaster is not unique in this situation. All across the United States, cities are facing a massive housing crisis. Despite the goodwill of city councilors across the entire nation, there is no foreseeable solution to these problems. Despite what we consider the local governments to be a weapon of popular will, they only function as a gatekeeper to private developers that understand that only through the process of the bidding of the private companies coming in and the developers who are poised to make millions of dollars in profit off of these construction projects, only through their goodwill that we get the basic services that we need, which is like housing and healthcare. We have, as public citizens, we have no ability to consider how the basic functions of our city are conducted. So as we sit here, we have homeless people on the streets that live in our parks. They have to do encampments just to survive. They have it's absolutely a tragedy what happens in this city, happens in cities across the entire nation, that we are held hostage by a class of people who own all of the wealth in this nation, as since the recession of 2008, 2009, has only skyrocketed upwards as we continue to see in our communities the lack of basic necessities that are required just to live every single day in this country. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other comments? Seeing none, we'll go to the report of the mayor.
Thank you, President Reichenbach. I wanted to, this is a great segue from the previous speaker's comments. We will be issuing a request of proposals for the city's affordable housing program using our federal home dollars. These proposals are due on December the 20th. This funding is to support two types of projects: development of affordable rental housing and single-family homes. The eligible expenses include real property acquisition and construction costs. Projects are required to be affordable and be occupied by lower-income households. The period of affordability is subject to certain program regulations, but in no instance shall it be less than the term of the City of Lancaster loan. At least for rentals, at least 60% of the units shall be affordable to and occupied by persons with incomes at or below 50% of the area median income adjusted by family size. No more than 40% of the units shall be affordable to and occupied by a person with incomes at or below 60% of the area median income adjusted by family size. For home buyer projects, the second type of projects that will be supported potentially through this funding, all units shall be affordable to and occupied by persons with incomes at or below 80% of the area median income, also adjusted by family size. We are fortunate in some ways that we have the most money that we've had to be able to allocate because some other projects did not come through. So that's the upshot. The downside is that we have available funds of $1.4 million, and it is possible to receive additional funds through the Home Consortium, and we are encouraging applicants to request the total amount required and to work city and county to see if we can work to support larger projects. This is a proverbial drop in the bucket as it relates to the need, which we so eloquently just heard, related to the dire need for affordable housing in the city of Lancaster. This is one small way that we can put our federal dollars to work in leveraging additional funds from other sources, both state and federal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Report of the President of the Council, just two things briefly. It's not more of a report, but just more of a comment. One, I just want to answer a quick question for one of the speakers, because I promised I would. When it comes to the CRIS funding and the parking authority, DCED from the state approves a self-liquidating debt audit to make sure that they are capable of carrying that load, part of their bond issue to be allowed to do that. So they are approved for the funding. If the CRIS wouldn't come through, they are understood to be able to take up that cost. Certainly, there's always opportunities where that may not happen, but that's with everything that gets guaranteed all across the city or any type of municipal authority. Secondly, I just want to clarify as well that the parking authority does not set the prices for parking tickets. The city does. So they would not be able to raise parking tickets to charge people. That is city council's purview. Just want to clarify, so I gave you the information. And if you want to talk more about it offline, we certainly can, sir. But thank you for asking the question. The second thing, just briefly, Ms. Winslow, Ms. Rojas, Mr. Rossing, and the others who have come over the many months to speak, I just wanted to answer you directly that I do hear you. And there may not be times where we necessarily have a direct dialogue all the time, but I don't want you to feel like your comments are in vain. This is a challenging role at times because there are very serious restrictions on what we are able to do. And that's not an excuse, that's a fact. So it can be very, very frustrating at times when your comments hit so true. And yet we recognize that there are so many limitations. So the reason I bring that up is just, I want to encourage you to keep on speaking. You are not ignored. You're not being heard. It is just a very challenging situation that needs advocates on the side to do it. And it needs elected officials, not just here, but in Harrisburg and in Washington to do their part. So again, I hate to make it sound like an excuse, but it's an extremely complex issue, which is why it hasn't been solved yet. But I just don't want to ever give you the impression, I'm going to be leaving this chamber soon, but we've got a chance to know each other a little bit. And I don't want you to ever leave the chamber thinking that people aren't listening to you. I am hearing you, absolutely hearing you. And it breaks my heart when I hear some of these conversations because I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and friends and family of mine didn't grow up with a lot of money. And I'm not even comparing myself to some of the poverty that people live through. But the reality is these struggles are real. These conversations need to be had, and I just want you to know that. So I didn't want to leave this chamber someday without having that direct dialogue with you and your colleagues. So thank you for your comments. Are there any council comments before we adjourn? Hearing none? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mayor, can you clarify for me? We're using AMI for the MSA, that is the county or for the city?
For the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you for sticking it out, those who did.
He did, yes.